Your hormones and your menstruation cycle make a huge impact in how you feel. Hey ladies, let's dive into today's podcast. So I have had hormone experts on this podcast in the past, and I have talked openly about my own journey through menopause. Post chemo, well, first of all, I didn't know this, but when you do chemo, your body goes into menopause. And so I was in menopause at the age of 27. Coming out of it, I had a nervous breakdown. And I remember at that time I was into functional medicine. And I spoke to my doctor and I just said, I have life skills. I have coping strategies. I use them on a daily basis. This is not working. And she looked at me and she said, Heather, hang on. We're going to figure this out. And I'm telling you right now, I know that I am not the only human that has experienced the mental and emotional side effects of hormonal imbalance. And I am telling you, from one woman to another, if you feel out of your mind, that is because you most likely are. And it's a symptom, and it's your body's way of saying we're out of alignment. And I am here to tell you that you do not need to fear menopause. You do not need to fear perimenopause. You do not need to fear postpartum hormonal imbalances. There is hope and possibility. It does take energy and effort, and there are so many freaking people out there, mainly outside of a traditional medical model, to support you on this journey. So let's dive into today's episode with Nicole Jardim. And I'm going to let you know a little bit about Nicole, but I also just want to be very frank and honest that a lot of my colleagues, it's interesting in the online world because I've become friends and colleagues with a lot of women who support women's health. And of course, they started this journey because of their own period problems. And I hear so much from women, like this anger and resentment around their physical body and how it's let them down and how they've always suffered with these problems. And I'm here to tell you, as somebody who is thriving energetically in her life, in every area of her life, my focus now is how good can it get? I don't focus on disease and just wait for shit to happen. I'm like, I want to be so far removed from that version of myself. I want to be so far removed from societal's expectations of who I need to be and how I need to feel. I want to be that 1%. So if you are ready to join that journey with me and you are so fucking done with the struggle, you are so done feeling like shit, you are so done being told that you're fine or that your test results are fine, it's time for you to think outside the box. The mental and the physical is so connected. So let's dive in. Nicole Jardim is a certified women's health coach. She's a writer, a speaker, a mentor, and the creator of Fix Your Period, a series of programs that empowers women and menstruators to reclaim their hormonal health using a method that combines evidence-based information with simplicity and sass. Her work has impacted the lives of tens of thousands of people around the world in effectively addressing a wide variety of period problems, including PMS, irregular periods, PCOS, painful and heavy periods, missing periods, and many more. Rather than treating the problems or symptoms, Nicole treats women and menstruators by addressing the root cause of what's really going on in their bodies and their minds. She passionately believes the fundamentals to healing any hormonal imbalance lies in an approach that addresses the unique physiology of every person. This is essential to reclaiming and maintaining optimal health and vitality at any age. All right, let's dive into today's episode with Nicole. Periods and pandemics.
A loaded topic.
Yes. So welcome to the podcast. And before I hit record, you and I have known each other for a very long time.
Yes.
10 years-ish, 8, 9, 8-ish maybe years.
Yeah. Long time.
So let everyone know a little bit about you. And I said, you're not the first period conversation or hormone conversation I've had on this podcast, but I believe in the power of hormones because I've experienced it firsthand. And typically women don't start seeking this unless they have to. And I think we need to hear it from different people in order for it to land the right way, because I think it's such a big topic. So a little bit about your background, why you are known as the period lady and you're not known as the period lady.
Period girl, lady, it's all the same.
Your book, Fix Your Period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So there's a lot of periods in my life. You know, it's one of those things that I never aspired to be. As you can imagine, we don't really grow up and think, oh yeah, this is definitely what I'm going to do with my life. But it rather fell into my lap. And it was because of my teenage experience with periods, terrible teenage periods, the kind that, literally are so heavy and so painful they make you see stars. And I lived like that for so many years because my mom had also had terrible periods. And she just assumed that this was kind of the rite of passage of, teenagers with periods. And so that went on for a long time. And then I finally saw my doctor. I was about 19 or so, almost maybe 18, 19. And she immediately put me on the pill and she was like, why aren't you on the pill already? And I just thought, I don't know, please tell me and put me on it. And so I went on it and it felt like it immediately solved all my period problems, which of course, in retrospect, it didn't, but at the time it did. I didn't have any of the problems I was having anymore. And that went on for a few years. And then I started to have all of these side effects. And that was really the catalyst for getting into this work because I finally ended up in the ER actually with an allergic reaction to a medication for a urinary tract infection, of which I'd had probably 12 at that point. And, I'd been in and out of my doctor. It was a revolving door for medications for yeast infections and UTIs and all the things. And so finally, I came off of it with the help of an acupuncturist. And that truly was a turning point for me. I realized that I just needed to figure out my health and I just couldn't live the way I'd been living anymore. And I think that we all get to that point, generally speaking, no matter what it's related to with regard to our health. But when I started to get really passionate about it, I realized that if I didn't know this stuff, lots of other people didn't know it either. And that was it for me. And so fast forward many, many years. And here I am doing this work, working as a women's health coach. And I wrote a book called Fix Your Period. I explain things in a way that I think is so important for women to get because we don't get this information. And I really think this information is our birthright. I think it's something that we need to know. In fact, it can be a matter of life and death in many cases. And it's that serious and we don't have it. And so here I am. That's my mission on this planet, doing this.
So what was I'm so curious when you going to the acupuncturist or whatever your first entry point was, what made you go there? Were you like, I'm done? Or did your parents help you? How did you make that appointment?
No one helped. I mean, one person did help. Actually, it was the day after the UTI medication experience in the ER, bright red, hives all over me, 103-degree temperature kind of situation. And that was it for me. I thought, okay, I cannot do this anymore. What am I going to do? And I really had no idea because at that point I was so ingrained in the Western medical way of doing things that every little problem I had, I'd go to some different doctor. I'd seen a gastroenterologist for all the gut health issues, and then the skin doctor for the melasma all over my face from the birth control pill. And then of course the gynecologist and the this and the that. So I went to college. I was in college. I went to school the next day. I met up with my friend who was Hawaiian and she said, oh, you should totally go and see my acupuncturist. And I just thought, okay, fine. I have nothing to lose. And I made an appointment literally that day. And I went and saw him. He was probably 70 something years old, very traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And the first thing he said to me was, the birth control pill, that's the cause of all of this. And I just thought, oh God, this guy is full of shit. and that was really it for me. And I kept seeing him every single week. And finally I came off of the pill because everything he started to say made so much sense to me. And that was it.
I love how you were very suspicious, right? But there was a point, like I always just like to reflect to people how you were curious, like enough, you were in so much pain, right? You're like, well, if I keep doing the same thing over and over again, I'm not going to see a different result. So I have nothing to lose. So let me lean in here and see what happens. And then it's like that breadcrumb led you to another breadcrumb, led you to another breadcrumb. I always come from it. Maybe it's just my background in mental health around, people don't realize, like I'm getting more and more messages from women saying I'm in perimenopause and I didn't even know what that was. And they're just losing it. They're like, I feel out of control and I'm not getting the support that I need. And I know that there's different, it seems like every hormone expert, is in a little niche, of a period of the hormones, like a little stage of the hormones. And it is overwhelming. Like for myself, someone who's not in that. And you also, I don't have a medical background. I also have no desire to have a medical background. I'm not a researcher. I'm a visionary. And I just want to feel good. I want to feel good. Tell me how quickly to feel good. Yeah. I hate taking supplements. I will take it if I know that the pain is going to go away. But I need to know that there's a plan and there's a way out. It's not a one and done. It's not a quick fix.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I can totally appreciate that. And I wanted to say that I call them stages of the menstrual life cycle because that's really what they are. And we have such woefully inadequate education when it comes to those stages. And I agree with what you're saying too about perimenopause, that forget periods. We have no idea about perimenopause. I had a woman ask me recently whether she should even bother working on her hormones because she's about to go into that perimenopause stage. And I was like, oh, honey, this is the time to be working on your hormones. If there ever was a time, this would be it. Because I feel like that decade, give or take a few years, that most of us are in perimenopause is truly your moment. If you have not done anything at all to prepare yourself, this is it. This is your time to start to do that because every one of those stages builds upon the last. And so if we come into perimenopause completely burnt out and frazzled and we're not taking care of ourselves in the ways that we need to, whether that's nutritionally or managing our stress in some way or whatever, all of it really, it's going to be exponentially worse than it would normally be. And I really believe ultimately that we have to move away from this idea that every stage of the menstrual life cycle is supposed to be terrible, because we talk about this all the time, right? Puberty is a nightmare. Being a teenager and having those periods sucks. And then in your 20s and 30s, you're getting pregnant or you're trying to get pregnant. And then there's postpartum, which is riddled with all kinds of problems as well. And then we have perimenopause and then, the terrible menopause at the end of it, and then you die. And I keep thinking we have got to shift this belief that all of it's supposed to be terrible.
I'm smiling and almost chuckling because my husband said something to me the other day about some fear that people have. I said, you know what I'm terrified of right now? He goes, what? I said, menopause. And he's like, what? Because clearly he has no idea why. I'm like, you have no idea the nightmare that women paint in your mind of what the horror of menopause is going to be. Yeah. And when I'm talking to women going through that phase, they're like, that was the most isolating, horrific thing in my life. And I've gone through menopause. I went through menopause post chemo. And that's why I love having these conversations, because nobody prepared me for that. They're like, oh, you're going to go into menopause. They didn't say, oh, you're going to have to admit yourself into the psych ward. Like nobody said that to me. And I was very angry. I was like, don't ever do that to another human again, because I was educated. I had the life skills, and, your hormones can take you to very, very dark places. And you go to the doctor, what do? Here's an antidepressant, here's the pill, here's whatever. And it's not a long-term, right? Like, yes, great. Please give me some relief right now because this is not good, but you got to have a long-term strategy. So the reason why, well, not the reason why, but you were having this conversation on Instagram before, I was like, we need to talk about this period and the pandemic and how people's cycles are actually changing during the pandemic, pre, post, during. So I'm curious what findings you're having and then kind of why you think that is.
Okay. So we have had quite a year, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
And in case anyone hasn't been living on planet Earth, it has really sucked for a lot of people. And it's really interesting because sort of like May or June last year, so a few months into the pandemic, I started getting messages from women asking if it was normal that their periods had just gone completely haywire and they'd noticed it since all of this had started. And I remember thinking, okay, that's really weird, but it's not that weird because women's bodies are designed to be really keenly attuned to external stressors or dangers. And this was actually meant to protect us and our offspring. And it was also meant to protect us from getting pregnant in dangerous or undesirable circumstances. So things like, or times like in a food shortage, for instance, 10,000 years ago. It was a great protective mechanism back then. But of course, fast forward to now, and so many things have happened to us. So many terrible things have happened to us worldwide. And of course, then we also have the 24/7 news cycle and social media filling our heads with all kinds of fair narratives that, I'm not surprised at all that our periods are responding in this way. So it's really interesting with regard to the symptoms. I've heard a whole range, but almost all of the women I've talked to have said that they've, first of all, never really experienced symptoms like this before, or maybe they've seen it a few times in their lives, and typically when it's a time of extreme stress. So a lot of the time I'm hearing heavier than normal periods, or very, very heavy periods that are just not at all normal for that person, or extreme emotional PMS symptoms that are completely disruptive to the person's life, and as well as period pain, just excruciating period pain that they've never experienced before, headaches, migraines that are completely debilitating and just take them offline, as well as other symptoms like long periods of spotting in the lead up to a period. So suddenly they're just spotting for 10 days before their period comes, and they've never had something like that before. Large blood clots, ovulation pain, a lot of ovulation symptoms I'm hearing about, acne that came out of nowhere. So those are some of the symptoms that I'm hearing about.
Wow. I've heard some people talk about their periods in the last year, but I never put two and two together. And if I reflect, I would say my PMS symptoms have gotten worse. And I thought it was because I was more in tune with my body. But I also completely decluttered my food, eating at home more and eating less processed food after I went through my first lockdown.
Yeah. First of many.
My first lockdown. But so what I'm taking away from this is we are very connected to our environment. Mm-hmm. And I think we underestimate that how in tuned we are with nature, but also the ecosystem and the emotional ecosystem. And I think we discount that a lot, especially as women, when it comes to our stress and why do I feel like this? What's wrong with me? And then where we're seeking our information from, right? Like, oh, we're gonna, there's this label, this diagnosis, this. So in the theme of taking back control of your health, once you are aware of how your body is responding to external stressors, what do you do to change it without having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on testing and things that maybe you don't have access to?
Yeah, I think that with testing, we don't necessarily need to spend $500 on a test that we may have been told that we do. When it comes to something like testing, I like to simplify things, and I tell women to just start with the basics, and then I can talk about a little bit about what you do after that. But first of all, when your period goes haywire and it's never done that before, just remember that we're all feeling the collective worldwide stress of this pandemic. And it's not like this is a stressful situation that's happening in your life and that's a microcosm of the bigger world. It's 100% just happening to everyone. And I think our bodies are really responding to that. And so just keep in mind that this is potentially a short-lived experience. From what I've gathered from a lot of the people I've spoken to, they've said something along the lines of, yes, this happened to me. It was about 3 to 6 months long, or it was 1 or 2 cycles. And then it was, generally over once I started to get back into a routine. So I think that last March, it was the disruption to life as we knew it was so jarring for so many of us and such a shock to the system that our bodies, like I said before, responded. So we got into that place of that fight or flight, and our brains are the first sort of they take in all the information. So they're the information processor, and then they're going to tell your body what to do. And so they're going to say, oh, we're not going to ovulate this cycle, or we're going to ovulate a little bit later just because this feels like a very dangerous time right now. And our bodies, remember, don't know the difference between 2021 and 1,000 years ago. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like you said, women say, oh, why is this happening to me? And it's kind of happening to everyone, just so everyone knows you're not alone. I've had a lot of women say that to me too. I thought I was the only one, but you're definitely not. And the point here is that just remember that this is potentially short-lived. And once you got back into a routine, it's likely that your period started to regulate again. It may not have, though, based on your own hormonal resilience. Are you 21? Are you 45? It really just depends where you are in the life cycle. And so, of course, that's the first thing to consider. I think the second part of this is that, it's really about how you're taking care of your health. And I understand that sounds a little generic and, oh, what does that even mean? All of those kinds of things. But remember that your cycle is a reflection of your overall health. And that's what's so great about being a female, is that it is going to tell you that something is not quite right. And it'll do that through symptomology. And so if you're having all of these symptoms, it likely indicates that the external stress or your perception of stress is clearly at a heightened state. And your brain, your hypothalamus and your pituitary, which govern your ovaries and how they work, are saying, okay, there's just too much going on here and it's just not a safe time. So that's really what we have to remember. And your ovaries, your menstrual cycle, really only want a few things. They want to feel safe. They want to feel like they're well fed and just not like they're in this constant state of fight or flight or stress. So how do we do that? So we focus on our nutrition, and we focus on what kind of stress are we allowing into our lives. And I recognize that that's really subjective, but I do think we have a lot of control over what, our perception of what stressors exist in our lives.
Can you just touch on nutrition for a second? That has nothing to do with diet culture.
Oh yeah. Ugh. Hate diet culture. Yes, absolutely. So this is about feeding your body so that it can work optimally. That's really all this is. I really like to keep this simple. I'm not into labels at all. I do not buy into this whole, oh, well, I got to try this or this one or this diet. I really have never done that. I actually call it the fix your period way of living or eating, because that's really what it is. Because for me, of course, your menstrual cycle is the epicenter. And if it's working optimally, that almost across the board means that you're in great health. And if there are problems with it, then that is indicative of an underlying condition or some kind of problem or disruption. And we have to work on the underlying disruption, not the symptoms. And so when it comes to food, really what I want everyone to be doing is arranging their plate, and half of their plate should be veggies, preferably those leafy greens and or cruciferous vegetables, which are going to help support your liver, detox hormones so that they leave your body and don't keep recirculating. I really like to see a quarter of your plate protein and maybe another little bit on there as fat. And that's really it. And that is what's going to support I should say carbohydrates too, by the way, so everyone knows I'm not anti-carb. But ultimately, that is going to support your blood sugar. And your blood sugar is so critical. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter your weight, any of it, to your overall hormonal health, because it's governed by insulin, which is an incredibly powerful hormone that will absolutely mess with all of your sex hormones and cause major period problems. And we're never ever told that if our insulin is out of whack, which it can be because our cortisol is also out of whack when we're stressed, they work together, it'll cause problems for your ovaries. And so that's really what this comes down to. It's literally just about feeding yourself the nutrients that your ovaries need to work optimally.
Dang. It's so interesting to me how everyone has their entry level with hormones, because I've never perceived myself to have period problems. I've had like a few painful periods in the past, but I can't even tell you when that was. But that's not, again, my overall spotting. I would say I have a regular cycle, but if someone assessed it, would be like, that's not normal, or whatever it is. It's like our perception of normal, right? Kind of like your story of, this is the way it has always been. This is the way it was for my mother. Mine always went back to mental health, but blood sugar. Did I have this conversation with you this year?
I don't know, maybe a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fixing my food this year, I really was, I've always been an under eater. My go-to was, I don't have time to eat.
Right.
And then I didn't know how much I needed to eat, like for my body, like no idea. I didn't even care about the weight. It was just, and my body actually physically gained weight, probably because it thought I was going to die. So it was like, we got to put all this weight on. I had so much trauma on my body. And so anyways, I figured out how much I had to eat, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm eating more. And my body is releasing, like probably because it feels a little bit safer. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
My blood sugar. I had a breakdown in the last 12 months, like a crying breakdown. My husband's like, oh my God, what's wrong with you now? And like jokingly. And I said,
mine sounds the same.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh. I lived my whole life thinking there was something wrong with me. And I just didn't know how to regulate my blood sugar because nobody ever taught me about like adequate nutrition.
Yes.
And he was like, okay, so why are you crying? And I'm like, do you know how many times I've gone to the doctor to be like, why don't I have enough energy? Why am I so anxious? Why am I this? Why am I that? And the labels. And I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And my biggest fear, Nicole, of diving into food was that I was terrified that I was buying into diet culture. And I had to sit with my fear of buying into diet culture, but I had to bypass that because I'm like, I just want to fucking feel good. But everything that I saw was labeled as a diet. And then people being like, that's bad, do this. And I was like, I don't even know the ABCs of fucking nutrition and what my body needs as fuel. And I'm just like, this is so fucked. And the mental shit I had to like work through just to take a stand for myself that I am worthy of having proper nutrition, and then find somebody that I trusted to educate me on that. And then the courage to actually follow through when people are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a mind game.
Oh my God. Yes, I could not agree with you more. I feel like when I think about all the things that I did over the last 25 years to my body in the name of being a certain size, and it's excruciating to think about, and what I continue to see. This is the thing, when I think about like, just the 1,500 calorie diets and the not eating after a certain amount of time. And, there are a lot of issues, obviously the diet pills, all of it. I feel like it was never ending, and we will be absolutely stuck on that cycle. And we're constantly just told to lose weight, or to eat this way in order to look this way. And we're never told, like you said, to give ourselves the nutrients that we need in order for our organs to function the way they're supposed to. And that's a critical component of our health. And this is why I feel as though we see, in my world, so many hormonal and period menstrual cycle related problems, because our cycles are so dependent. I mean, when I think about our ovaries, we need zinc and selenium, and we need magnesium, and we need the B vitamins, and all of those play a very specific role in ovarian function, follicle development, egg development, release from the ovary, all of it. And then of course the corpus luteum, which is where the follicle, where the egg comes out of on your ovary, that's going to produce progesterone. So the production of the corpus luteum, so dependent on those nutrients as well. If we were actually taught that, if we had an understanding of this, of course we would potentially eat differently, because it would make so much more sense why we're doing it.
I'm going to take my boys out of school and have them do a book report on your book and just say, you are going to educate every woman in your life on her menstrual cycle. And I have lots of, I guess, little girls and women in my life that it's just so sad that midlife, people still don't know this. I don't even fully know it. And I'm just like, fuck it. Screw online learning. Let's just bask ourselves in our periods and figure this shit out, because that is going to be a high leverage action to change your life. Let's get rid of the stress.
Please let me how that goes with your boys.
And today's education, he'd be like, oh my God, Mom. Be like, you want to know how a girl really gets pregnant? Let's figure this shit out.
Seriously. Oh man, yeah. I wish I could be there for that. I think that it's one of those things though that we really need to be talking about more when I think about teenagers nowadays, and the fact that the pill is still prescribed as, for every single problem that they're experiencing. It's so sad to me, because I'd hoped that we would be in a better place by now, but it's a slow change. And ultimately their bodies are so impacted by shutting down this process of ovulation. And when that conversation is still in its infancy with regard to how their bodies are operating. And it's just so unfortunate, because I feel as though we could save ourselves so much pain later on. I think one of the most popular things I hear from women, or the most heard things I hear, is something along the lines of, if I'd known then what I know now, or if I had just paid attention, or if I had just asked questions. And I'm like, you were too young to really give fully informed consent. Honestly, you just were.
And this is why I also talk about why we need to become the people that we most desire our children to be. And because let's say I was raising girls, regardless, I mean, boys' education is a whole other can of worms, but also the power of the menstrual cycle, right? And also the whole male cycle of 24 hours and female cycle. It's just like awareness is key in anything. But I think if my mother was like, listen, I've had a hell of a time. I'm taking back control of my cycle. I want you to know this. And I'm rolling my eyes. And I'm like, oh, Mom, like blah, blah, blah. But she's just like, no, and just planting seeds, right? When I needed it, I would have been aware of it. And I feel like this is how we change those conversations. But too often we say, if I knew then what I know now, and it's like, do something about it now, because the person behind you, the young woman behind you, is going to hear a different conversation because you chose to learn something and pass that education down.
Yes, I love this so much. And I think it's really applicable when it comes to that age group, because oftentimes all we hear when you're that age is don't get pregnant. You can't get pregnant. We want to prevent pregnancy, the whole spiel. And it's never about how is this going to impact our health? And, and that really is the crux of the issue, because I wouldn't be doing this work if I hadn't been on the pill for 5 years and had experienced all the problems that I had. So in that sense, it was quite a blessing for me. But ultimately, our women's and girls' health they're not equal to men and boys in our society. And that to me is such a huge injustice. There's so much medical bias, and the fact that we're not talking about bone health and heart health, and we're not talking about our hair and our skin and our libido and sex, our sex drive. I mean, that's just, we don't talk about that with teenage girls, and, and all of it. And so, and our ability to get pregnant, of course, later on is also a potential risk. But I have seen girls in their early 20s, mid 20s with osteopenia because they've been on the pill since they were 10 years old or 11 years old. So there's no, they're not making enough estrogen or progesterone to support their bone health or bone growth. And you can't get that time back. Your bones don't stop growing until, you're past puberty. So it's kind of unbelievable to me that we're just overlooking all of that still, even though the science is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you're an oppressed population, you have to dig for this information and find it on an uncensored podcast, and then and then try to read books that are uncensored and educate yourself and become a critical thinker, which is what I'm trying to advocate for people, is like, how do you want to feel? I don't know how to get there for you. I have a little bit of like a step-by-step, but you're going to make it your own, and you're going to have the feedback from yourself and go, did this feel good? Did this not? Keep tweaking and course correcting. And we're all here to teach each other, but nobody has the exact answer for one or the other. You and I were talking about caffeine before I hit record, and I was like, I have this weird relationship with coffee where I've gotten rid. I don't drink. For the most part, I've given up my chips, and I know I'm very in tune with my body. And when I ask my body, like, what do you need to feel better? Like, I talk to my body, it will say, please limit caffeine. And I will be like, okay, but you taste so good. But now I take radical responsibility of knowing why I feel like shit, rather than being like, I have no idea, and just being in denial and very disconnected from myself.
Yeah, I so appreciate you saying this. And obviously I know this is the theme of your work. And I'm a big believer in this too. Ladies, you have to take responsibility for your health. I don't know why this is happening to my period or what the hell is going on. It just doesn't work anymore because you're just perpetually victimizing yourselves. And it's not going to serve anyone ultimately. And it's up to you to find this information. I have a whole book on it, literally 400 pages. And I've made this easy for people because I really want us to know why these things are happening so that we're now motivated to do something about it. And ultimately that is going to be the key to living a better, more sustainable life. And, again, like I said, your period's not just your period. It is literally a reflection of everything that's happening in your life. And you can see every single time you get it, the symptoms will shift depending on what the last month or 2 months has been like for you, because again, it's just a barometer for what's happening with your body.
I really enjoy that insight because sometimes I get really nervous of like the week before and what it's going to be like. And it is very dependent on, it's almost like the cycle, right? Like the processing of, who knows? I mean, there's so many different aspects, and I feel like I'm just learning and growing. And it's definitely an ongoing process because every area of my life, I am determined to say, how good can it get now? Instead of, oh, it sucks. Like, let's just suck it up and hang in there. But I do want to ask you a question, because I think a lot of times we get stuck in the cultural conversation around how shitty things are or why they happen the way that they do. But flipping that into how resilient the female body actually is, this was a big mindset shift for me when I was in my healing journey, because the common theme is like, you're broken, you're you're damaged goods, and let's just hope that the symptoms go away, and then you're just like sailing there. But I found this whole way of being of like, how good can it get? And actually your body healing itself. And that even though maybe you've had a severe diagnosis or you've always had issues with your period or your health or whatever that is, the resiliency of the human body. And yes, there may be damage, but also how it can rejuvenate itself. So just curious if you have any take on that.
Oh, yes, so many. I always say your body isn't broken. Your symptoms are not just its way of betraying you. They're literally just signs, they're language, they're your body communicating with you. And when you are experiencing symptoms, all it means is that there is an underlying imbalance, hormone disruption, whatever you want to call it, that needs your attention. And oftentimes, because our health problems, specifically women's health problems, whether that's a really heavy period or a really painful period or a period that doesn't even come at all, are so perpetually normalized by the medical industry, I suppose you could say, that we don't even know that that is a sign from our body that there's something wrong. So what typically happens is this stuff goes on for years on end. All of these biological processes continue to be more and more disrupted because we don't realize that there's something that we're doing or something that's happening in our lives that's contributing to that disruption. So ultimately, our bodies are telling us this in a way that we don't understand because we've never been taught their language. They don't speak English. They don't speak whatever language you speak. They just speak in terms of symptoms. And so if we're able to learn our body's language, we refer to that as body literacy or period literacy, you're really at such an incredible advantage because no longer are you looking at your amazing body, which it is, like you said, it's incredibly resilient. And I feel like when I think about modern women, we don't give our bodies a lot to work with and they continue showing up for us every single day. They do what they need to do. But the truth of the matter is that the period problem, the hormonal imbalance, whatever it is you're experiencing does not mean that your body is damaged or defective. It just means that it's talking to you, sometimes screaming at you, that something needs attention. And if you pay attention, so you start tracking your cycle, for instance, you start tracking these symptoms that you're experiencing and seeing when in your cycle those show up, or when they show up after maybe you've eaten something or you've had a really hard workout or whatever it is, you're going to start to see the patterns. And those patterns are going to allow you to have awareness and then be able to disrupt and change what it is you've been doing.
I love this. You are magic.
Thank you.
Keep going, because I know how frustrating it is when we've been conditioned to believe that symptoms equal symptom management versus symptoms equal your body talking to you. And I believe that when someone is ready to change their life, they will be open to receiving, and we just got to keep talking until they hear it.
Oh, I love that so much. I completely agree. I feel like we're here still talking and we'll continue to do so. And everyone's on their own journey for sure.
Exactly. And I always just encourage, what like last minute wisdom do you have for somebody who is frustrated and they've had period problems? We'll definitely tell them where to find you and your book and all of that. But, if you were sitting with a friend and she's like, I'm just so fucking fed up with this, and I've went to doctor after doctor and even functional medicine, and I still feel overwhelmed. Like what do you say to her?
I always say to get back to basics because I find that when we go to the conventional doctors, we're offered the medication route or the surgical route. And that obviously is necessary in some cases, but certainly should not be the first line of defense. And then if we go to a functional or naturopathic doctor, sometimes what tends to happen is we'll get a diagnosis or whatnot, and then we get a bunch of supplements. But because it's a doctor-patient relationship and you're not spending that much time with them or meeting with them as consistently as maybe you might need to, you'll find that you fall through the cracks a little bit. And that's not to say that that's the case for everyone by any means, but that's just been kind of what I've observed. And what I want everyone to do is to just get back to the basic things. So work on making your plate, work on balancing your blood sugar. I talk about this on my website, in my book, in my programs about testing your blood sugar, literally using that as a little bit of a biohacking tool and seeing what's going on with your blood sugar. That alone solves 90% of the problems that I see. So if we just go back to the basic steps of food, nutrient dense food, stabilizing your blood sugar, being a little bit nicer to our guts because our gut health really does determine our overall health, and supporting our liver detoxification, and then the stress piece of things. So those 5 pillars, I feel as though they can change our lives dramatically. And yet, like I said, oftentimes we end up jumping from step 1 to step 5 before we've really done those foundational bedrock pieces or implemented them. And that's what I have everyone do. And usually a lot of those things are resolved. I feel like if you are so freaking tired of feeling sick and you've tried all of those things, then it's phase 2 for sure. And so you got to start looking at your environment. So environmental toxins, mold in your house, or in your environment, underlying stealth conditions. So viruses, Epstein-Barr virus, or something else that is basically putting your immune system into hyperdrive and not allowing you to heal the way you think you should be healing because you're doing all the things. That's where I would say, okay, it's time to look at step 2 or part 2 or phase 2 of healing. But the first steps really are overlooked a lot of the time.
Okay. So basics, and healing takes time. So when we are conditioned to believe that it happens overnight, that is frustrating as well. So patience is key in a culture that is go fast, go quick, go harder. And it's a lifelong journey. Like, people are like, are you healed? Are you healed? I'm like, are we ever fucking healed? I think that's the whole point of being human, is you continue to heal until you die. And then, depending on your belief system, we'll see what happens in the next life. And I just, I'm like, you can be healing and experience joy at the same time, because that's what makes us imperfect, awesome beings. And if you need to cry your way through to PMS until you figure it out, do so, but just dance while you do it, and, eat some broccoli along the way. That's my hormone prescription.
Your hormone tip for the day.
Like from the non-hormone expert.
I agree with you completely.
Drink some water.
I just love all of that so much. And I just, I want everyone to remember too, that it, like you said, it really does take time. I always say to all of my clients that it takes about 1 to 2 months of healing for every year that you've had these symptoms. So give yourself some grace and some time, and just know that your body is on your side. Your body is not just randomly rebelling against you. It is 100% working for you all the time.
Yeah. So appreciated. Nicole, where can everyone find you? What's the name of your book, your podcast, Instagram, wherever else you are?
Yeah, all the things. So you can find me on my website. It's NicoleJardim.com. And you can also find my book. It's at fixyourperiod.com if you want to go there. I've got a lot of bonuses to go with it. It's called Fix Your Period. And then I'm on Instagram as well, Nicole M, like Madeline Jardim. And my podcast is The Period Party.
The Period Party. Awesome. And your last name is spelled Jardim.
That is correct.
Perfect. It's right in front of me, so I knew that. So sorry. All right. Thank you. So appreciated. And I always encourage everyone to go follow you on Instagram, send you a DM if you listen to this episode, and let Nicole know what your biggest takeaway was.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Well, that's it. And I wanted to thank you for listening today, because I truly believe you are exactly where you need to be. And now I have a favor to ask. In exchange for the value you've gained from this free podcast, I'd be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Share the show with at least one woman in your life who you feel would benefit, and or take a screenshot and share it on social media. And always feel free to tag me at Heather Chauvin. The world does not benefit from your guilt and fatigue. The world needs more women who are willing to unlearn everything they've been taught. Women who are courageous enough to feel good and not let guilt run the show. I believe you are that courageous woman. To see if my community and coaching is the right fit for you and your big vision, the relationships you desire, the money, time, energy that you know deep down you are capable of creating, then head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me. That's Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me, and take the next step in the right direction. Taking a stand for how you feel means you are taking a stand for how your children show up as adults. And if you have a personal question or topic you'd like me to answer on the podcast, text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. You are so worthy of feeling good. Now go do some scary shit.